a great play doesn't equal a career. Getting a job doesn't mean you can keep it. Lots of people in the world do things that are remarkable once or twice. That is not sustained success. Sustained success is years and years and years of overcoming obstacles and challengers. Taylor Heineke had a great play. He's fun. He's 6'1", barely, 205, 210, played at Old Dominion, and this play against Tampa in the playoffs was awesome. It is not a career. He played in the XFL recently. He's 27 years old. Even in this game, he had a 78 passer rating, was 26 of 44, a touchdown and a pick. He was really okay with one great play. Washington does not have their quarterback in the building. This is where I've been predicting for a month now Sam Darnold will land. You know I like Sam Darnold. I think he deserves a second chance. Now, some have suggested Cam Newton. I do not believe Ron Rivera is looking for Cam Newton. I think he wants a young, coachable, head-down kid he can teach to play football his way. Cam's a star. He's made his money. He's been to a Super Bowl. I think Cam got tired of Ron and Ron got tired of Cam. I think they're better apart, and I don't think that's the answer, though I've seen it suggested today, and I'm kind of rolling my eyes at it. I don't think that's going to happen. Washington gives the Jets a second-round pick and gets him. Remember, Washington still has a first and 2/3 from the Trent Williams deal with San Francisco. So Washington's not compromising their draft. They'll still have 3 picks in the first 3 rounds. And you can get Sam Darnold right now for a second-round pick. Washington also they do not have a good enough draft position to get a top quarterback. So I will tell you this, that Jeremy Fowler, an insider for ESPN, is echoing what we've been saying for a month now, that Washington's starting quarterback is not in the room. He says, of all the active teams in the early quarterback carousel, Washington is the one that consistently comes up. That's Jeremy Fowler. So this is my prediction. I've done it a couple times on the air. I think Sam Darnold in Washington is a perfect fit. I think Sam was a linebacker in high school. He's a tough guy. He's a physical guy. He's a coachable guy. He not highly demanding guy. And Ron wants a young kid he can build around that plays his style of tough football. Plus, I think Washington's actually a little bit like Tampa. Not as good as Tampa, but Tampa for years always had talent. They couldn't get the quarterback right. Washington's football team's got some good players. They've got a really unbelievable front defensively. I like some of their wide receiving talent, tight end talent, running back talent. So I think they won the division last year. I think Washington's actually pretty good. I think it's a pretty good team that if you can get the quarterback right, be a 10-11 win team. I really believe that. John Fox has the highest winning percentage in Bronco franchise history. 16 years, 2 Super Bowl appearances with the Panthers and Broncos. And John Fox, former NFL head coach, is now joining us live in the herd. Love this. He's one of 4 head coaches to win both an NFC and an AFC championship game. You know, John, we were talking about this, about, Deshaun Watson. He wants a voice. When Tom Brady left New England, you read the stories, he kind of wanted a voice. Russell Wilson increasingly. Hey, I'd like a little voice here. You know, it's interesting, John. You and I probably grew up generationally where if you were Phil Simms, you did what Bill Parcells told you to do. But it is a different generation, John. And how do you reconcile that with still having the coach is running the system, but you give these emerging star quarterbacks some say?
Well, I think it's actually good to let your leadership and particularly your quarterback in that locker room a voice. When players feel like they don't have a voice, sometimes they'll shut you out. So I think it's a good way to do it. Look what Bruce Arians did with Tom Brady. I mean, they were more down the field, kind of the passing team in the past, at least Bruce's philosophy. I think, Tom had input and Tom was able to incorporate some short, more consistent, high percentage passing game. And I really ultimately think that was the difference in them being a playoff team versus being a Super Bowl champion.
It's interesting, as you well know, when Peyton Manning came to Denver, Russell Wilson named Chicago as a team he was interested in. And people could say, well, Chicago, but Chicago reminds me a little of Denver. You had an emerging offensive line. You were 8-8. You had made the playoffs. You had some very nice weapons on the perimeter. Chicago's got Tariq Cohen. Allen Robinson's terrific. And it's funny. So when Peyton chose you, there were teams that had maybe a better record that were kind of interested. What do you think ultimately, though, Peyton, a smart guy, saw in Denver that he liked?
Well, I'm going to say a couple things. Let's not forget, Colin, that both the teams we're talking about, both Tampa and Denver back when we signed Peyton, had really good defenses. And whenever you have a quarterback, they understand, look, I can kind of have real input and can control what we do on offense, but I got to make sure wherever I'm going, whether it's the defensive coordinator or the head coach, that defense is pretty squared away. And I think, much the same happened with Tom when he was selecting Tampa Bay, and also Peyton as he selected, Denver back, when we signed him. So I think, sometimes that gets lost, but I do think that plays a big role in the decision-making, whenever these guys, whether it's a Russell Wilson, and I think Russell sees that in in Chicago as a really good defense.
John Fox joining us. So it's interesting. I was just telling my team this morning as we were building the show, I said, so Washington's got a great coach. They made the playoffs. They have a championship defense. And it's March 3rd or 4th, and they don't have a quarterback. And because Alex Smith is gone. And I said, this feels like Sam Darnold to me. And it's interesting because I loved Sam out of college, but he regressed last year. How do you view Darnold? Because you and Ron are both defensive-minded coaches. He can make mistakes. He can be a little reckless. But he's 23. He's really talented. How would you view him? Would you roll the dice in a Darnold?
Yeah, I think in Washington's case, I saw your pre-show before I came on. I think I would agree that they've got a really good defense. Ron's a great coach, a great communicator. Players, respect and play hard for him. So I do think it's good. And then as far as Sam goes, look, I loved him coming out. He was my number one quarterback when he came out. I think all that's still there. He just needs a really good quarterback coach, a guy that's going to put a lot of confidence in him and faith in him. I just think he needs a change of scenery. That team, the Jets, was not very good. I don't think he had a great supporting cast by any stretch. And all those things are there as far as going to the Washington football team. I think it's a good marriage and one that I think draft capital-wise they can afford.
It's the draft is April. Free agency now is coming up. And free agency is interesting because it's like a little bit like buying a used car. You don't know if the odometer, you're supposed to trust it completely. You don't know if the car's got quirks a little bit. What was your theory? Now Arizona just went out and said, we're going to go get J.J. Watt. We all kind of know he's a good locker room guy. He's a big presence. What was your theory on free agency? Were you reticent sometimes to do it? Bringing in a big personality? Often you're bringing in a big salary, John, and other players can resent that if you bring in an outsider and he's the highest paid guy. How did you view it?
Well, I always kind of looked more for the middle of the road type of guy. I mean, we picked up, Marlon McCree, who ended up being a starting safety. Heck, we picked up Jake Delhomme for a small contract, that took us to a Super Bowl early on in Carolina. But year two, we were able to go out and get Stephen Davis, Ricky Prohl, and Jake Delhomme, and that kicked us from a 7-9 team into a Super Bowl team. Those guys are really good players. I'm not slighting that, but they weren't big contracts. And we were able to go, I don't want to call it bottom feeding, but, kind of value shopping instead of going out with a big name, and paying a whole lot of money.
It's funny. I get a lot of crap on Baker Mayfield because I've said before, I tend to like my I always say I like my presidents to be presidential. I like my quarterbacks to be quarterbackial. I don't like them stepping in it. I love Russell Wilson. I love Brady. I loved Eli. Baker sometimes can step in it. And, this week he was talking about UFOs, and I'm like, listen, I'd prefer he not go into alien talk, but, okay, whatevs. And the fans always come in that, Colin, this stuff doesn't matter, and I'm like, well, they haven't given him an extension. Maybe they do have some personality concerns. How do you view what you're comfortable with. Quarterbacks, John, are just different. They're viewed differently.
Yeah.
They're paid differently. You're demanding maturity at 23 years old. You don't have to have the most mature safety. If a kid can play, can play.